Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight. You've got Patrick, the Trusty Huckster from Trusty Huckster Mercantile, coming to you tonight for yet again another Trusty's Vintage Deep Dive. So let's see who we've got. We've already got Laura coming on, and actually Laura is a great person to, well, I'm sure she's probably watching because she is actually the next deep dive. So Laura's going to be taking notes, see how I do, see how we do these things. But thanks, Laura, for joining us. She will be on in 2 weeks when she talks about her collections and the history of dominoes. So we're kind of excited to have that. It'll be a little bit different. I like to do niche things, and that one's going to be really niche. So we'll see what ends up happening. She found a fantastic addition to her collection recently, and a historic Chinese collection of dominoes. So I think there's gonna be a little bit more to it than even I had anticipated. So welcome, Laura. Hello, Karen Radford. Thanks for coming to the deep dive. I know we have you on our the live sales every Thursday. Nice to have you. Can't remember if I've packed your shipment yet. Trying to finish that up. I moved into my new mall space at the Vintage Mall this weekend, and that took way more time than I thought. So I'm a little behind in invoicing and shipping. So I apologize to anyone who's waiting to get information from me. Hello, Michelle, Mermaid Cove. So we've got the West Coast represented tonight. Katie from Vintage to Vinyl. Got the East Coast represented, Florida. Linda Punky, welcome, Linda. Thanks for joining. Margaret Johnson, Karen Donlinger. Oh, we got more on the West Coast. Got into San Francisco from Karen. So welcome this evening. So we've got a good start to tonight, and I appreciate all of you finding the channel again and joining us for the deep dive, because tonight is actually a little bit different. I've only done a handful of these so far, but historically, all of my deep dives have been with someone with a YouTube channel. So there's always a little bit of a connection, and they can send a YouTuber, their people can come over and watch the show. But this one I'm really focused more on what the subject matter is. And so when I decided to do something on vintage clothing, I went to the person that I knew was going to give the best presentation and they have the most knowledge on vintage clothing, who doesn't happen to have a YouTube channel. So it's fine. We don't need a YouTube channel to be here. Anyone can be a guest on the Trusty's Deep Dive. So tonight I've got with me Julane Sullivan. She is joining me from All Dressed Up Costumes in Batavia, Illinois. And Julane and I actually know each other. We've known each other for about 4 years now. She directed the first Christmas show, third show that I ever did in community theater. And she has the very rare distinction of being the only director to have ever directed a show that had both myself and the Huckster Helper, my daughter Amelia, on stage together. My daughter and I have never done a show together before then or since. It was Midnight Clear, the Christmas, oh man, I don't remember the title. Midnight Clear, Christmas, not the Armistice, Christmas Truce? Christmas Truce of 1914. So it was World War I. My daughter was a German studies at that point, and she played a German soldier, and she taught everyone how to sing in German. So that was one of the unique experiences. Let's see, who else we got tonight? We'll let Julane introduce herself in a second. We've got Suzanne McLean, so she's got a local, Villa Park represented. Rebel Junk, thanks for joining us, Rebel. Char's Nest, thanks for coming back. Bev, thanks for joining us from Embellished by Bev. Nicole from Nesting Haven. I know, Nicole, you were really looking forward to this, and I've already warned Julane, you're probably going to have questions. So we'll see if she's up to this task. Kelly from Moss Stone Story. She'll be doing a deep dive next month. She'll be doing Kelly from Moss Stone Story Vintage. We'll be doing a deep dive on golden books. So if you've watched some of her haul videos, she talks about golden books a lot. So I'm going to put her knowledge to the test and let her share with everybody. We've got Joanne Baber, welcome. Hemlock Lady, welcome. Kim from Oh My Vintage. Lori, thanks for joining us, Lori. All right, so we're basically at 5 minutes past. I want to make sure we don't run out of time for Julane. So again, tonight is Julane Sullivan from All Dressed Up Costumes of Batavia, Illinois. I put some information along the bottom. She doesn't have a YouTube channel, but she does have an Instagram and Facebook channel. So encourage you to, if you choose either of those, to jump in and follow her on both of those. But let's go ahead and let Julane introduce herself. So I'll pass over to Julane.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Patrick asked me if I would kind of fill in and talk a little bit about vintage fashion. I actually own a theatrical costume shop. So I have studied the history of fashion. Am I a fashion historian? That's a little bit different than knowing the history of fashion. But I do have a collection of vintage clothes, and a lot of vintage pieces are actually in our rental collection as well. So I've kind of put a bunch of things together. I've been doing costuming for, oh God, longer than I would like to admit. The costume shop itself was going to celebrate its 30th year this year, and then COVID happened. So renting costumes is just not something that's happening right now. So Patrick invited me to come onto the channel and talk a little bit about something vintage, and he kind of left it up to me. And I particularly do like the 50s, and I think it's very popular and very trendy right now. Mid-century modern furniture, mid-century modern homes, mid-century fashion, it's all kind of coming back into vogue right now. So if you watch The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, or if you watch Mad Men, those are shows that are just iconic and have beautiful fashions of that time period. So a lot of what we can talk about in this hour is a little bit of those kinds of fashions. Historically, I don't, Patrick, do you want me to just dive in?
Yeah, one of the things I wanted to ask is before we get started, because you said something that I didn't know, and so this is the way the deep dives work. Every once in a while, you'll say something, and I kind of want to chase it down. So you referred to yourself as a fashion historian, which I think is fantastic. But I'm curious, I didn't realize your costume shop was 30 years old. So what I'm curious is which came first? Was it the interest in the clothing first, and then you kind of turn that into the costume shop? Or did you start the love of the theater and the costuming, and you kind of augmented it and started doing the research so you could do the costuming better?
God, I forgot to turn the air conditioning off. Can you hear me over this air conditioning?
Yes.
Patrick?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Then we're going to be fine. I think they kind of went hand in hand. In all honesty, I started doing theater and performing, and created my own costumes. But as you're creating your own costumes, you are having to study whatever era it is that you are performing in. Or eventually, when I began just costuming shows and not performing in them as well, that research is there, and my interest in collecting these fabulous pieces also kind of took hold in my universe. I have a massive collection in the back of anything from probably, I've got some beautiful pieces from 1870 on up through, obviously, you know, current contemporary 80s kind of time period, and some lovely pieces from each one of those eras. I've got some that I didn't even dig out that are 50s, but so many boxes back there. It was like, I'll just find the pieces that we have in the costume shop that we've collected. So many of the pieces that I'm going to show you are pieces that we've actually rented out and have worked their way onto stage. So I think it kind of had a parallel interest. You have to understand the history of fashion. More importantly, the silhouette of fashion. I think the beauty of costuming for theater is the fact that you can pick an era and nod to it. I mean, I think if we look at Hamilton, because that's really popular right now as an example, Hamilton doesn't stay true to the characters, obviously, in racial tones at all. But it never stayed true also to the actual time period. It kind of morphed so that you could see that this show could happen at any point in time. The politics of it, the theme of it lasts any time. Another show that I often think about is Camelot, which was done back in like the late 60s, early 70s. That movie with Julie Anderson, and these costumes are just so 70s with a hint to medieval. And so I love that aspect of being a costume designer and understanding history, but being able to kind of morph the ideas together. Game of Thrones is another one. It doesn't stay true to its time period, but it's sumptuous and beautiful.
Now, when you end up having something like a Camelot, which does represent it is a specific era, but it's a very wide era. That's kind of something I'd never really considered, is it was the 70s interpretation of that era. And do you find that the different decades or different timelines, do they influence the adaptation of those eras? Or I just would have thought it would have stood alone.
I think that there are certain productions that are done, and I think film will typically stay more true to a time period than stage work will. I think stage designers can get away with a little bit more. But part of it is if you're designing, you're living in a time period where your perspective is the designs and the aesthetics that you're living with and working with. You are also confined to the fabrics that are available to you at that time period or during your contemporary time. So you may not be able to find the exact quality of fabric or types of fabrics or colors of fabrics, say in today, going fabric shopping, even at some of the best fabric stores, as you would have found, say, back in the 1930s or 40s. These beautiful crepes cut on the bias, trying to find that quality of crepe, that's always a challenge. Sometimes trying to find the colors that were very popular and true to that time period also becomes a little bit of a challenge. So in stage work or low budget film becomes real problematic. I mean, if you're working on a big film and you've got unlimited resources, you can have the fabrics made for you if you've got them. But,
if only.
Yeah.
So if we've got people who are looking at 50s fashions and they're looking to either recreate them themselves or they're looking for them at a Goodwill or wherever they're going to be shopping, what are the fabrics that were popular in the 50s and what, how will they actually recognize that? Maybe we go ahead and go into your little, we've had a couple of comments that love the aqua dress and a couple that love the red dress. Now, personally, I love the black dress, but you were standing in front of it, so I don't think everyone got to see it. So go ahead and a little show and tell, and I know you've got some surprises for us too. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
I've got a full collection. So if we look at the 50s, Christian Dior, he set the tone for the 50s. So it is post-war. Women during the war had gone to work. So the clothing that they wore during that time period was very tailored. The shoulder pads, the structure, the buttons that were almost double-breasted, straight skirts that had more of a masculine flair to them for women who were in the force. Fabrics were scarce, so slimmer skirts and shorter skirts, those kinds of things. But as the men returned from the war, and the women returned to their traditional roles in the house. Okay, we won't go into that. They began to dress more femininely. And Christian Dior just took us there in beautiful bias cut dresses. And the silhouette is usually what clues you in as a costume designer or a fashion designer as to what time period you're working in. So the silhouette of the 50s was a full bodice, a very tight, narrow little waist, and then big full skirts. And whether they were day dresses, cocktail dresses, evening gowns, prom wear, that was kind of the silhouette, the primary silhouette as we moved into the early 50s. Fabrics were sumptuous fabrics for the evening. So it was satins and silks and bias cut crepes. Daywear was cotton, and as we moved forward, as we came back from the war, a lot of wash and wear fabrics became popular. Some synthetic fabrics became popular. So for daywear or for women that couldn't afford the couture look, that's kind of the direction that they would go. So Christian Dior was the primary name of the 50s, 40s, all the way into the 50s, and then Yves Saint Laurent took over his line when he passed away. Domestically, in America, we had a gentleman called Charles James. He was actually born in England, but he worked here in the States, and he was the predominant kind of name that you would look for in high haute couture designer gowns for the very wealthy women. In terms
Before
of
we go,
labels, yeah.
I'm sorry, before we go too far in the labels, I do want you to continue on that line, but before we get too far away from it, you had talked about that Dior really kind of introduced that new silhouette. So what I'm curious is, basically good artists borrow, great artists steal. What was he? So it was reactionary. I find it interesting, like you were saying, because of the rationing on fabric, that's why some of the skirts were a little bit tighter in the 40s. So when he changed the silhouette, was he pulling any sort of historic reference? Like what point did the crinoline become the crinoline, like this huge wide skirt? Was that something that had appeared in earlier eras that he was bringing back, or did he invent that from scratch?
You know, that is an interesting question, because if you look historically over the time periods, we see a lot of silhouettes return, a lot of different styles return. A lot of what he was creating in the late 40s, early 50s was really kind of revolutionary and new. I'm going to like bring this little red number forward for an example, because this is that sort of silhouette that we're talking about, and the lines and the cut. So the sleeves, as you can see, this is one piece. This is something to look for that will tell you this is vintage patterning, where you got your bodice and your sleeve are all cut in one. There's not a seam here on at the shoulder. It's just one fabulous piece. This also has a high waist, and then it slims to the waist really tight, and then it just flares out. This one has pockets, ladies. And then it's full. And some of the skirts of that time period actually had built-in crinolines. This one didn't. So in terms of this silhouette, if I think back over the time period, there really wasn't a whole lot that was this strict of a time period. Victorian eras had tight waist, but not this same kind of cut. The interesting thing also about this silhouette is if you are actually finding beautiful vintage 50s pieces, sometimes it's very difficult to put on a woman's figure today, because they have the bullet bras. So the bodices of these had extra room in them for torpedo bras, bullet bras, whatever they were called, and then the very tight waist. And women of that era cinched their waist in, and from a small age on. And I think personally, because women always had some cinched waist from the time that they were little kids on, their waist maintained a smaller kind of profile. As I have costumed over the years, I have watched girls' waists just get larger and larger and larger. And I think it has a lot to do with fashion as well. It's sort of, you buying somebody's feet, they're going to stay tiny. I think because of this silhouette, women actually had smaller waists, partially because of fashion. This was also true in Victorian eras. They would like bone themselves in and corset themselves in so tight that they also had that narrow waist. But the actual cut, the bias cut of the fabric, that was all Dior, and that was all pretty much new to the 30s and 40s, and then he carried that on into the 50s to answer that question. But the silhouette, if you look, it's just this fuller bodice, tight waist, full skirt. And I love this particular dress because it just screams, it's not a Dior piece by any stretch of the imagination. They're very hard to come by and very expensive. This is actually one from our rental stock, and it has maintained itself so well. But it has that very much a Dior look. And of course, as you said, Patrick, designers, we call it parallel designing in our universe, where we will just see a design that we like and we'll modify it slightly to call it something else.
Now, before that one goes back, can you showcase one more area? You talked about the high waist, and you showed where the seaming was going up into the waist. Is there another seam where the skirt starts, or does it actually start from the high waist and then it's just darted in?
This skirt,
yeah,
this is one solid gored pieces. So a gored pieces, it's tiny at the top and flares. So this is one piece that just goes up to under the bust line.
Oh, wow.
If I get this, can you see? Yeah, there, you can see the seaming a little
bit. Okay, I just always assumed there was a waist seam too. I didn't realize that was all flared in the one piece.
That is another kind of style from the 50s, was the gored skirt. If it wasn't a circle skirt, which was the whole circle round flared skirt, gored skirts were also very popular because it also gave you that fullness, but it gave it to you in a way where it was very sleek and smooth here and along your waist before it flared out, which was kind of a lovely thing.
Now, some people will be thrown by this question, but I actually, if people know I do theater as well, I have actually worn a girdle, and I have actually worn, I've been performed in drag. When he created this, I know we weren't going to cover specifically the undergarments, but what was did the girdle, the cinched waist, if he wasn't intending for them to recreate the corset, what were the undergarments looking like that people were wearing up to that point? Or did he also invent the need to do that type of undergarment, that cinched, whatever it was called, the girdle or whatever it was called, to get that tight in waist again?
Well, that's a good question. I think that, yeah, because it was the late 40s, kind of that mid-late 40s, 50s, that girdle actually became a thing that poor women had to wear. It was also a part of the process of having your garters attached to that so that you could, keep your stockings up before pantyhose became invented, sort of things. But you're right. I hadn't even given that thought, Patrick, in terms of undergarments. Yes, that makes sense that the women had to suck themselves in, and the bullet bras to give them that full hourglass figure that we were looking for, that Marilyn Monroe look that everybody kind of wanted. So,
and related to that, we actually had a question coming in from the audience, is how did, with either, specifically the question was tied to Victorian, this was Michelle from Mermaid Cove, Victorian, but even this type of fashion, how did they address maternity clothes? If you were supposed to be cinched in that much, how did they accommodate maternity? Or I know that in the 30s, it was one of those cases I don't think you were supposed to leave the house. It was one of those, people didn't talk about it. So how did that get addressed in the 50s?
literally what you just said is kind of it. If you were pregnant, you were, well, if you were wealthy, you were pretty much taken care of. And it's not too much different than today, although women didn't wear pants at that point. You know what? And I actually have a maternity dress from the late 40s. I don't have time to go find it right now, and I didn't think to show it. But literally, it is a garment that very similar to this, where it has the shaping here, and then it'll cut in here, but it's full in the front. So it still tries to give you a little side shaping, but full in the front. And many of the coats of that time period, and I didn't bring any of the outerwear to show today. The swing coat was a very fashionable thing, just coming into fashion. And a swing coat basically came over your shoulders, had lovely sleeves, and it just flared out. And a lot of them were shorter. It was like a little flared jacket that came down to hip, or it could be all the way down to your, just below your knee kind of cap. But that kind of a bodice would also be worn. So it just had that little bit of flared. If you ever watched any episodes of I Love Lucy when she was pregnant with little Ricky, you would see what I was talking about.
Okay. Well, we'll get some people. It'll give people an incentive to check you out on Instagram. You can find your picture of the maternity dress and post it on Instagram.
I can do that. And the same thing in the Victorian era. It was literally the same sort of thing. The corsets just kind of had to go by the wayside after a certain, few months. And, you just wore fuller, looser fitting garments that just went down to the floor.
Excellent. One of our research specialists on the channel, Kelly from Mossstone Story Vintage, did some research and said she's done a video on, in 1910, Lane Bryant introduced maternity wear. So they were one of the first brands to actually create a fashion line specifically for maternity. But we had a question that came in because you had a pair of gloves with the dress. When you moved it, they fell. And it was kind of ties because you were also just talking about the swing coats. For anyone who watches Mrs. Maisel, she has like a different swing coat for every day. And so the question actually that came in, I just lost who asked it, so I apologize. From Nicole at Nesting Haven. Why were gloves worn so much? Was it a sign of wealth, or was it just the fashion? And I would throw in, again, primarily from watching Mrs. Maisel, it seems that they were worn at all times of year, that it had nothing to do with it being cold, that if it matched your outfit, you had gloves. So what was the introduction? How did gloves tie into this fashion?
It literally was an accessory fashion statement of that. It was the fad. It was the trend. And I don't think it had anything to do with wealth. Even lower class women It was what you did. You wore gloves when you went out. You wore a hat when you went out. I mean, if you watch Mrs. Maisel, everybody's got hats on throughout the entire thing. You know, it was the trend, and it was the fad. I'm just saying it that way because we do a lot of crazy things every once in a while as well that make no sense year round. But gloves were a fashion trend, and the richer you were, the more gloves you would have, and gloves that would match your ensembles. I actually didn't bring them all out, but I have like a couple Tupperware tubs of gloves. So there are turquoise gloves and pink leather gloves and taupe gloves and gloves with little, wait, this one, I don't know if you can see, these have little tiny detail eyeletting on the
beautiful.
edge. I think,
Yeah.
you can see it. I mean, this is a simple pair that we brought out. This is another lovely, do I have two pair? No, I do. I have two pair back here. This is another absolutely darling little pair. It's got little tiny rhinestones on it. I don't know if you can see. Yeah, there you can kind of see that. These are summer weight gloves. They're little sheer gloves. I have giant paws, so I can't get my hands in these, but move this way. So these are just sheer little organza gloves with little rhinestones on them. So they're summer weight to go with your little lovely go to church outfit. And these are some beautiful, these are suede gloves that have a little sequining on them. I know that close up, they're kind of looking gray, but they're black. And they're suede. So this is a lovely go out to evening during the winter kind of wear with your black evening gown. And glove lengths are also very interesting because these obviously are little to your wrist gloves. These are gloves that go kind of could be with a little 3/4 length sleeve ensemble. And then we have the full length gloves for your evening wear as well. So any other questions? I'll just dive in.
Well, I had one because I was actually going to ask about length. So you mentioned the opera length gloves, and I knew that those existed in the 50s. But if you go back in eras, we're kind of jumping around a little bit, but if we go back in eras like more the Edwardian, the opera length gloves also had the buttons at the wrist. So you wouldn't take your gloves off. You would just unbutton them and tuck the fingers in. Was that still a thing that existed in the 50s, or did the gloves just come off?
The gloves would come off, baby.
Gloves are coming off.
Yes. They did have the buttons as well. For the purpose of, you would put your hand in and you'd want the wrist to be a little bit tighter to have that sleek, elegant look. So the buttons would have to be unbuttoned in order to pull it off, but you would actually pull your gloves off. You wouldn't do the tucking in the 50s.
Okay. That was my question, but yeah, so we can go on to the rest of your presentation.
Okay, I'm just going to pull out a few pieces randomly, right and left. I'm going to start with some basic Daywear. These are some cute little vintage pieces. This is a romper. All right, let me get this one under my arm. You had mentioned homemade pieces as well. This little label inside, and I absolutely adore this. I'll see if I can get you to see this. This says, original by Emmy Lou. Emmy Lou design. Now, Emmy Lou was married to my uncle. But the workmanship on this is absolutely exquisite. And although she made this in her home, you would never, ever be able to tell that this was a handmade piece. I wish I could get close enough for you to just see the exquisite stitching on the little tiny bias tape and these teeny tiny little stitches that are just perfect uniform there. But these were called rompers. They were little onesies that you would put on, and they have elastic at the waist. So you could slide it up over your hip, say tighten up. They would just fit right over your thing, and you could just romp around in these in your backyard in the summer gardening, or if you were going off to the beach but you didn't want to wear swimwear because you're going to play volleyball. Cute little tiny rompers. And my aunt made this for my mother. It was one of her Christmas presents.
Now,
so
going into the undergarments again, is that an era where ladies would have been in bare-legged, or would they have been fully stockinged in those rompers?
Yeah, totally in these rompers, bare legs. By
Okay.
the 50s, yes, wear stockings when you went out, but if you were in your own home or you're at the beach or you're in your backyard with your friends, bare legs fine, you're getting yourself a tan. Capri pants were also very fashionable at the time, and capri pants were tight fit, and they would come up, you know, kind of mid calf. I mean, I obviously can't show you that, but this is a darling little navy blue polka dot pair of capri pants that has this charming little crop top. Crop tops were also very fashionable during the 50s. So if I can hold this up to myself, this would actually kind of end right below your bust line. So you would have a little bit of midriff showing as well. And this is just darling. It's got this little lace detail on the end of it. Again, it has extra darts to accommodate the bullet bras that were going inside of it. Absolutely darling. So these are just really cute. This is also another one of the crop tops that I wanted to show you that's out of my vintage collection. Just the detail embroidery stitching on it. And it has little hidden buttons that go up the front. So it's got the tiny little ivory buttons, the little pearl ivory buttons, and little handmade stitches, and they're hidden underneath the detailing of this little crop top, which is absolutely darling.
That's gorgeous.
So that was just a fun, yeah, it's just, it was fashion was fun back then. I want
Now,
to
Michelle,
a couple of day dresses.
Before we jump on, Michelle at Michelle at Mermaid Cove had the same question that I did. You had referred to those, and I've heard the term, but you've referred to those as capri pants. Is there a difference between that and pedal pushers?
Pedal pushers. Was it pedal pushers was the word you're going to say?
Is there a difference between pedal pushers and capri?
No, and actually pedal pushers was the proper term for the 50s. Capris has kind of, you know, worked its way into our, but it was a pedal pusher back in the 50s. So thank you for asking that question and
Excellent.
making me be right. Excellent. Okay. In terms of day dresses, this is a little cotton day dress that could be worn by a little housewife. Or this could have been a little dress that, say, a teenager might have worn, because it's just absolutely darling. Checks were very fashionable back then. So you can see that this has got a little bit of a checked pattern. But what I really love about this is this waist detail. Again, it's got that silhouette where it comes kind of under the bust. This is your natural waist right here where we have this seam. But here is this little detailing where they have made their own bias tape and done a little crisscrossing, if you can see that. And that it's just the attention to detail that you see in dresses from past eras that I just am so fascinated with.
And what is the fabric behind that?
This is just a cotton fabric. Simple cotton.
Is it sheer behind the bias tape?
It is not sheer, but it is fairly thin. Now, what you're seeing behind the the handmade bias tape that's going here, this is a little bit of just a simple white cotton, and it is a thinner cotton, so it's a cool summer dress that you'd want to wear. But it is it's not see-through, so you could definitely put on your bullet bra and go to town with this. And whether you chose to wear a crinoline, a light crinoline or not, would be your choice in the summer as well. It's a darling little dress, I thought.
Was there a unified hem length for skirts? Because the bigger the crinoline, the wider it would stick out. So where would skirts have hit in that era?
Where, for the most part, through the 50s, you wanted that hem length to be somewhere mid-calf. So a few inches below your knee, not mid-calf, mid this section. What is this? So your calf's down there, your knee right about there.
Okay.
Mid that leg part. What leg part is that?
So past the knee. I didn't realize it went that far down. I thought it was right around knee length. It's longer than that.
I just want to show a couple other little sweet, simple little day dresses and some of the silhouettes that we're looking for. Again, as you can see, this is that one-piece capped sleeve. This is called a capped sleeve. This has got sort of a little cowl neck collar, which was also very fashionable mid-50s to the late 50s. This has got a really lovely V-neck in the back with this sort of little, almost sailor-esque collar backing to it. the little cowl collar goes around into. The other thing that I love about this particular dress, again, in the 50s, just the attention to detail again. And I don't know that you can see this, but this embroidery that's on here is raised. So it is tufted and then stitched down. So all of this has a little bit of a raised embellishment to it. And then the other thing, once again, it's the piping. The piping and the bias taping. So this little piece here that is stitched into the waist creates the illusion of a tiny belt without being one. And it literally is just a piece of piping that is stitched into the dress. This is just such a darling little dress, I think, for a little housewife or, you know, a young lady. Another one of my absolute favorite dresses is this one. And this is sort of a waffle cotton, which I don't know if you can actually see the quality of the fabric. If you can see the texture a little bit.
Yes.
I know you're getting shadows from what's holding up my iPad. The other thing that I absolutely love about this dress, again, is this detailing, again, is a three-dimensional detailing. I don't know if you can see it that well on camera. And it has little rhinestones just tucked in the center of each one of the little daisies that's on here. And this work has all been hand stitched on. It's absolutely exquisite. It's Jerry Guild. You know, it's probably some local brand name, but again, it's this beautiful silhouette, this one piece that goes up into the sleeve, the cinched waist. It's just a very soft, absolutely beautiful sort of afternoon garden party dress. I think it's just exquisite.
You just touched on one of the questions I had, the silhouette, and then also going back to the length of the skirts. Joanne Baber commented T length. Did the silhouette or the length change based on the event, like whether it's a work dress or whether it's a cocktail party versus an evening wear? How did that impact the silhouette and the length?
Yes, and thank you for the T length. That's the perfect way to describe that as well. Sometimes I don't come up with the right words at the right time. But yes, definitely that did occur. So a day dress could be a little bit below the knee. A teenager's little circle skirt could be a little bit higher than what the housewife would wear. That T-length day dress. If you're going to a cocktail party, it's going to be a little bit longer than that. If you're going to an evening dinner party or some elegant theater or opera, people actually dressed up for those things, it would be a full-length gown. This particular blue gown here is a full-length. I wish we could actually see all the lengths of these. But you know, long lengths, I'm going to bring a couple out real quickly. I brought this one out because there's similarities to that beautiful white one. This one is black, and I don't know if you can see, this has just tiny little knife pleats all the way around the bodice of it. It has this beautiful scoop neck, again, that fabulous little piping, bias tape work that they do at the top, made out of the same exquisite fabrics. And then this has got this gorgeous lace that has been embellished on it. Now, interestingly enough, I need to fix it. It's falling off. But I'm kind of glad that I learned that it is actually top stitched. This is another vintage piece because the lace has discolored a little bit, and I can actually pull it off, whiten it up, and stitch it back on. This, interestingly enough, black dress with this white lace. As I was showing you that last white one, I was like, it would be so pretty for a little, you know, afternoon garden wedding. This was actually worn at an afternoon garden wedding. So some lovely woman wore this beautiful black cocktail dress for her wedding. It's absolutely exquisite. Just the knife pleating and then the large knife pleating at the bottom. It's an absolute beautiful piece of dress. I don't know if there's a label in this one that we can take a look at. Amerique. So this dress was actually an original that was made up in Wisconsin. So a local designer back in the 50s. So I'm going to just put that there. In terms of length, I'm going to close out this dress. I kind of love this because if you look at the print of this, doesn't it just scream mid-century modern? You know, I feel like that this print is just, well, Not my cup of tea, honestly, but I have seen so many pieces of furniture and houseware that has this same sort of color pattern and collective. So again, it's got this wonderful cap sleeve. It buttons down the front, and this is what we would call a hostess dress because of the length of it. And this is a full length to the ground. This would be a woman throwing a lovely party in her home. It could be an afternoon party, it could be an evening party, but this would be called a hostess dress because of the length and because it's also not out of a very elegant evening type fabric. It's more of a daywear fabric, but it's kind of a fun print and a fun piece. So in terms of length, that's why I brought this one up to show you.
Now, this is the first one I think that you've
Studying it.
shown.
Okay, I'll pop.
This is the first one I think you've shown that had
Huh?
buttons down the front. So is it?
Buttons down the front?
Yeah, you said that's the
Yes.
first one I think you've shown with buttons. What was more common? Was that just it was similar silhouette, but most of the others had zippers up the back. What was the more common, either for day or for evening?
Most of them actually have zippers up the side.
Oh,
Interestingly enough, because yeah, back in the 50s, they wanted the silhouette of the back to be as clean as the silhouette up the front. So zippers were like this one. It also basically has a zipper up the side, even though it has the buttons in the front. If
wow.
I can get you to actually see these buttons as well, look at these beautiful vintage buttons that are on this dress.
Oh, wow.
And I'm lucky that this dress has all of them. Too often I've got a beautiful vintage piece and there's like one button missing, and you can't match them. I mean, it's impossible, and it just makes me cry when that happens. All right, so we'll pop that away.
Well, if you ever decide to sell them, you have an entire lineup of people waiting to buy most of the dresses you've shown.
Oh, fantastic. All right, I absolutely love this piece as well. This now kind of gets us a little bit later in the time period, but this is sort of a sheath dress. So it almost defies that silhouette of the full skirt, but it's got the little pencil skirt, which was also popular in that time period. This thing has been hemmed, unfortunately, because we rented it to some short little girl who made it for her. So it basically should be, I know I should not be renting these to people, should I? I should be coveting them in a back closet. But I brought this piece out because this piece says I could be on the Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. I could be on her mother in particular. So it is a sheath dress. So underneath this little piece actually is a full, the whole piece comes from the shoulder down. And then this is just all sewn together into one piece. And it has like a kind of a nod to the 40s with a peplum, but it's got its waist and its tight fit, and it's a beautiful orange pattern print. And to me, it just said, yes, Miss Maisel's mother, I don't know her name, I can't remember, but that's why I brought this piece out. And I brought this one as well, because this is a darling little suit. Look at this cute little suit. This has got like the 3/4 inch, the 3/4 length sleeve on it as well, which became kind of popular back in the 50s. And then, of course, you'd have your matching yellow gloves that would go with it, and probably a matching yellow hat. I don't know, matching yellow hat. Yeah. But this, again, if I get it close, is that check that was so popular back in the time period. It has the covered little buttons. Look at how cute in the matching fabric. It's just so darling. And the skirt has just got some little kick pleats in the back, and the hem's coming out. I need to repair it. But again, I just see this on the Marvelous Mrs. Maisel's mom again. Yeah.
Now, for something like that, it looks to me like a jacket. Would it be taken off? Like, would there be a blouse underneath it, or was that something that was the outfit? It's not a jacket.
You would definitely have a blouse underneath this, so you could take the jacket off, and you might have a little matching that would go on it. And I brought a few blouses out. So since you've asked that question, I will show you a couple of little vintage blouses that I have. These are lovely little 50s pieces. This wonderful sheer fabric. Blouses were so feminine and delicate. This one in particular I brought because it has the Peter Pan collar. Peter Pan collars were, I keep forgetting where my camera is. The Peter Pan collars were these beautiful little rounded collars. If you can see that. This one's got a little bit of lace on it, but that Don't ask me why it was called the Peter Pan collar. That I don't know. I just know this is what it is. But that's something we could probably look up, and I can throw on my Instagram at some point as well. But I love the little inset pieces. If you look at this, this is very sheer. So you would definitely have to wear a camisole or a slip. Slips. I know we weren't necessarily talking about undergarments, but slips were just a thing. You wore it. You wore it along with your girdle, and then you wore your bullet bra, and then you put your slip on that was accommodating of your bullet bra that you were wearing. So you would have all of those pieces on, and you never left your house without a slip. I actually find it interesting when I'm costuming, like at a college or a local high school, and a girl will come out wearing something, and I'm like, oh my God, you're going to have to wear a slip with that. And they look at me like I'm speaking a foreign language, like contemporary young girls don't know what a slip is. So we'll put this one back away. This would be a really cute little blouse to wear with a circle skirt. We'll talk about those next since I mentioned it. I just jump from thing to thing to thing. But this has like that typical little collar, and you would wear this buttoned up or one button down, and you would have the little scarf tied around your neck as an accessory. And I do have some of those. We'll get into that as well. Again, the little cap sleeve on, I gotta get my camera. The little cap sleeve on the side. And again, the inset pieces of lace going down the front. But this has just got a wonderful little, this with a little circle skirt and a cinch belt and a little scarf and maybe a little sweater. Absolutely darling. And I love this piece, so I had to bring it out. This one I actually dug out of my collection, and it is just a charming little, beautiful layers and layers of little lace. So this would be, you know, you're going someplace special. You're not wearing this to school with your slip and your underpiece. It's got the hint to the Peter Pan collar with the lace on it. Absolutely darling little piece. Circle skirts. Since we mentioned that, we'll just dive into that. When people think about the 50s and circle skirts, a lot of times go, oh, you're talking about poodle skirts. Well, yes, poodle skirts were a thing, but they really weren't as popular as we, in hindsight, make them. It lasted, it was one of those trendy things that lasted for a short period of time. But the circle skirt in particular, and why it was called a circle skirt is because if you laid it on the floor, it actually created a full circle. This is half and half, and you can see it's half of the circle, and the other half of the circle is the back. Again, if you look at it, it's got the checks. I brought this one out because it's also a little bit quilted, and interestingly enough, kind of lightweight quilted fabrics were used for circle skirts for the fall and the winter. This is just a darling little, tiny little waisted things. Nobody can fit into them. These other two skirts I brought out because they're so fascinating. This one, we have unfortunately rebuilt the waistband, so it's not completely vintage. But if you can see this gorgeous circle skirt, this is all hand painted. This beautiful piece, and unfortunately I don't have the label anymore because it left with the original waistband, but it's got gold and bronze painting on it and just this exquisite pattern work on it. I love this piece, and I did not snag it out of my rental shop soon enough to have salvaged it before it got ruined. And I wanted to bring this piece out as well. This is not a full circle skirt, but it's got fullness. But what I wanted to show with this again is how bias tape, this is bias tape that is made by, hey, checked fabric again, and how it has been intricately sewed onto this piece. So we've got it going around the bottom. We've got it in double stripes going down the side. This poor little thing has got a little bit of sun fading on it, but I just love the detail work, and I wanted to show that to you as something to look for when you're, you know, doing a little bit of research or trying to pick up some pieces for yourself, for a collection, for your wardrobe, or if you're doing theater as well. Those are things to look for. This bias tape just was used in such exquisite ways that it looks expensive. And sometimes I see people sewing with bias tape now, and I'm like, oh, you just cheapened that. They knew how to work with bias tape back then. It was absolutely phenomenal.
One of the best examples I think of when I think of circle skirts, I think of the movie White Christmas. all of the costumes that Vera
Yeah.
Allen wore were full circle skirts. And when she starts spinning in those skirts, they're just amazing. We had a quick researcher pop in, Kim from Oh My Vintage, did a little research for you. But you can still post some more pictures. Peter Pan collars are named after the collar worn by Maude Adams in her classic 1905 performance as the lead role as Peter Pan. And I thought Peter Pan collars were older too. I thought they were from the 30s. So you're saying they're from the 50s as well?
Oh yes, definitely. Yeah, it was a huge thing in the 50s. Those little Peter Pan collars. Mm-hmm.
Excellent.
But yes, thank you for doing that research. I kind of assumed it had something to do with Peter Pan, the play / musical, but I never actually took the time to dive in. Okay, so we had talked about the skirts and the circle skirts and the blouses. One of the other things that were very popular to finish off that ensemble, of course, were the little cardigan sweaters that the women wore. And I pulled out just 3 that I absolutely wanted to kind of highlight. This is it's a lovely taupe color. But the reason I pulled this out is so that you can see like the detailed, I gotta go this way. I was just backwards with my camera. The sweaters, these have little pearl buttons on them, which are just darling. And then all of this lovely embroidery work that was done on these cardigan sweaters. It was just exquisite. And every sweater just had its own personality. Now, you could have a sweater that had no detail on it, that just matched your outfit and your ensemble. But I just pulled out the ones that I kind of liked the most. This is another one that I just find so fun because on it is all these wonderful telephones and the history of telephones. So this has just got such great personality. And I think that was one of the things that they did with these sweaters is they showed personality in them. Many of the 50s little cardigans also had fur collars. Many of mine, the fur collars haven't lasted. It's just the nature of the costume shop and where I'm storing them, unfortunately, and I should probably do it better. But I loved this piece and I wanted to share that one because it's such a fabulous little piece. And then another one, it's mohair and it's got just a little bit of 3-dimensional embroidery on it as well, just showing you different rather than having the beadwork and the sparkle. It's a little bit more of a daywear look and would be so cute with like a hot pink little either a pencil skirt or a circle skirt. Just so cute.
Now, when was the concept of the twin set where you had the sweater and then the same sweater on the overside? Was that much later?
Again, that was in the 50s, but it was a little bit later in the 50s. And I actually couldn't find one. I was looking for one. So thank you for asking that question. So I was diving through and I know we have them, but unfortunately, sometimes the little, the shell under sweater that would fit underneath the cardigan and they're matching. So what he's talking about with a twin set is basically a shell type knit sweater that has a matching cardigan that goes over it. And that's called the twin set. And I think that they have randomly been separated from each other in different areas because we have people that will come in and put things away that are not necessarily fashion historians. So they just, oftentimes I'll find things put away by color and you're like, okay, it's green. Okay, I bet it's with the munchkins. And off you go and you look for it in some random place. And you go, okay, if I was so-and-so, where would I have put it? So I'm sure if I went and looked for where the shells are in one area and where the cardigans are another, I can eventually match them. And we do sing the Reunited song when we do that, Reunited.
Excellent.
Yeah,
before we run out of time, we've got less than 10 minutes. So I want to make sure we get to those hats behind you because there was a question earlier about when people wore the hats. Did women wear them inside? Were they day hats? Were they evening hats? What was the hat couture?
Hats. Women wore hats, period. They wore them. They wore them indoors. They wore them outdoors. They probably would wear them in their houses or if they're going over to a friend's house. Well, they actually might wear them if they're going to a friend's house for a tea party. But if you're in your own home, you wouldn't. I love this little hat. This is very much the Dior look. We call them mushroom hats, but they just kind of sat on your head. And this is one of my favorite hats in the entire shop, quite honestly. But let me grab some of those. Oh God, we didn't get into prom dresses and evening gowns and the menswear. And okay. Hats then, since you asked. I have sort of a little collection. Hats of that time period. This is a cute, you had to wear hats. This cute little, just fit over your head in a color that would match your ensemble. Just something very simple. Um, Hats could be very simple, could be very elaborate. The little veils, this one netting wise, it's got a little blue flower on top, would wear over your hat, and then the little netting could come down just over your eyes. Very popular in the 30s, 40s, but in the early 50s, these nets also kind of had a home. Colors. Colors as we got into the mid to the later 50s. If you had an ensemble, Marvelous Miss Maisel, have you all seen? This is a bright sort of lime green. This is a bright orange. I don't know. What might this, I don't know. Might match with this one that we had seen, maybe. But you would find hats that really kind of reflected, and women would have collections and collections of hats. And I absolutely love it when people are going through their grandparents' homes to go, we've got all these hat boxes. Would you like them? Oh, yes. We would so like them. This is another little piece that's just, if you can see underneath, it basically is very sophisticated pipe cleaners. They're covered in a velvet fabric. So it's wire covered in velvet and then structured and then covered with these beautiful floral pieces, a velvet bow at the back. So it would just sit on your head, darling as can be, and it would match whatever little ensemble you might happen to want to wear that with. I didn't pair things up. Feathered hats were also relatively coming into style towards the end of the 50s. So I grabbed a couple of these. Yeah, this is, yeah, just feathers on your head. Here's another one, feathers on your head to match whatever ensemble you might have. And the other things that I brought back over here, here's another one that's just very sweet and simple, hat form, but it would match a lovely pink outfit. And it's got a little flower on the side. Scarves. Scarves were very popular. The chiffon or the crepe chiffon, crepe Georgette fabrics. And the scarves that they wore back then, this was a lot of the teenager high school girls with their sweater sets or their twin sets, as Patrick mentioned. And they would just kind of go up around your neck and then tie. And you would have that with your sweater set, and that would be your accessory. Rather than jewelry, you would have your little scarf that you would wear.
Were the scarves typically square?
Huh? Yes. They were typically square back then. This is a tiny one. This is a larger version. But yes, they became, they were long rectangles in the 20s. They turned square, 30s, 40s, 50s. They became longer rectangles again in the 60s and 70s. And I think now they're the loop-de-loop things, the things that don't end. Clutch, handbags. I put some handbags down here as well. So the little clutch purses were very popular. Sweet, simple little handbag. This would be an evening. Another sweet, simple little handbag, little shape from the 50s. And then the clutches became very fashionable and chic. So this is an oversized clutch, certainly. This is one of my favorites. This is a little black lace. So I think you can see the little lace. So that would go with a little evening. And they all had like the little, they kind of pulled together, lined inside. One of these actually has a little matching coin purse inside of it. That was very popular as well. Saddle shoes to go with your circle skirts if you're a teenager. Those are things. Patrick, how much time did you say we had left?
About 2 minutes.
Oh my God, I didn't think I have enough cover, and I have men's stuff and I have prom dresses back here. I'm just
Well, they'll kill me if they don't let you show a prom dress. So go ahead and pull a prom dress.
Okay, so this is one of the prom dresses that's in actually pretty good shape. So it's basically satin and it's covered with tulle, lots and lots of tulle. And then this particular one, the tulle has been ruffled and then it has been attached on top of the tulle. And then individual little flower rosettes have been added to it, which I think is absolutely darling. This is more of a cocktail dress with its little scooped boat neck and lovely velvet on net skirt, which I can't really see very well. And then this is another vintage piece. It's got the wide belt, and it's got all the detail crisscrossing on it, made out of the lace. This is a very simple little prom dress, as opposed to a long one.
That black and white one reminds me of Grace Kelly's dress in Rope, or not Rope, Rear Window.
This one I love, and I'm going to bring her forward really quickly because I just want you to see the detail. Again, it's this one-piece sleeve action, but how they have made the detailing and the rosettes here at waist and then down at the bottom to tie this is a little cocktail dress. Tie that all together. It's just fabulous. And
well, I'm gonna go ahead and stop you here. Or no, oh no, this is my favorite dress. So go ahead and show the black and white one.
Which we didn't get a chance to talk about. This is a beautiful white satin with lace over it. It's got a beautiful little black velvet bow that's attached to it. Again, the tiny little cap sleeves. It's not a huge flared skirt. It's more of a simple, so it's a little later in the 50s. And I love this little feathered headpiece that I've paired it with. It's just a simple little dress. It's the attention to detailing that I just love from the 50s, the velvet bows and the lace on lace. And that prom dress back there has Chantilly lace on it.
Okay. Oh, fantastic. I've heard there's a song called Chantilly Lace. I'm sure Katie could tell us about. Okay, we're at the hour mark. There we go. Okay. We're at the hour mark, so we're going to go and turn it off, but there is definitely enough requests that people want you back. So running across the bottom of the screen is Julane's Instagram page. So it's at All Dressed Up Costumes. And I've got the next several months of deep dives are already booked, but you never know if Julane has some time, maybe in the fall, I can bring something back and do one specifically on formal wear. But wanted to thank Julane. And Julane, if anyone was interested in renting from you or trying to see if you'll take best offer or selling one of those dresses, how would they get in touch with you?
Well, the costume shop is alldressedupcostumes.com. That's pretty simple. Instagram or Facebook, Julane Sullivan. There's a couple of me, actually, weirdly enough. But I'm the Julane Sullivan that's wearing a Supergirl face mask right now. That is basically the best way to get a hold of me. And in terms of renting, you can rent through the shop. But a lot of these vintage pieces, I'm actually planning on opening a store. And I haven't decided if it's going to be an Etsy store or what to actually sell a lot of the pieces that I have. So some of these might be available.
If she does that, I will make sure to post that out onto all of my social media so that anyone who joined today's show will be able to find out about that. Maybe take one of those great pieces home for yourself. So again, I want to thank you, Julane, for joining me and joining Trusty's Vintage Deep Dive. Thank you to all of you who joined. I'm sorry, as things got started, I didn't get to call everybody out, but thanks to Sandra for joining, and Vinny, glad you were able to make it. But I hope you all enjoyed it. And I hope you're enjoying these deep dives. If you've gotten this far and you're not a subscriber, really would appreciate you jumping over and subscribing to my channel. Sign up for notifications, and as new ones pop up, you'll find out about them. I do the deep dives twice a month, and the next one is scheduled with Laura Bimos in 2 weeks. They're always on Sundays at 8 p.m. Eastern. So the next one's in 2 weeks on the 26th. It will be Laura Bimos with Dominoes. And she promised me that Dominoes is not some weird code word for bongs. So we're only going to have a conversation about games and dominoes, not about Laura's obsession with marijuana. But you know what? Laura's is fun in the chat. She's going to be fun live on a deep dive. So everyone, make sure you join us there. Make sure you check out Julane either on Facebook or Instagram. And again, thanks everyone for joining me, and thank you for putting your trust into Trusty Huckster. Have a great night. Bye-bye.